Hello and welcome to this video. We're going to be talking today about neutralization. Okay, so we're going to be talking about what neutralization is. We're also going to be talking about an example reaction that is neutralization. Okay? So let's get started with a little bit of a background. So we talked about in previous videos what an acid is. Okay, an acid is something that has a pH less than 7. And we've also talked about what a base is. So a base is a substance that has a pH that's greater than 7. And in the middle, okay, we have a neutral substance, okay, which has a pH of 7. Okay, now some of you are already thinking about, oh, look at those colours. Those colours are matching up with the colours of universal indicator. Okay, so let's have a little think. If we were to add an acid to a base, okay, so we take our acid, which is something that's pH 7, and we react it with a base, okay, what might actually happen? Now, one of the other ways of thinking about acids and bases is that they're opposites of each other. Now, when you add opposite things together, what they'll do is they'll cancel each other out. Okay, so if we're adding an acid to a base, what we're going to end up with is we're going to end up with something that's neutral. Okay, now that's only going to happen if we add these in equal amounts in which they react. Okay, now the chemistry behind that gets sort of like talking about in what quantities they react is a little bit more complicated than what I'm going to go into right now. Okay, but essentially if we add a certain amount of acid to a certain amount of base, we will eventually end up with some neutral products. Okay, but what are those neutral products? Okay, there are two of them. The first that we end up with is a salt. Okay, the second that we end up with is water. Now both of these are neutral. Both of them have a pH, okay, of 7. So if we were to take some universal indicator and add it to a solution of some acid and then add some base to it, what we're eventually going to end up with is we're going to eventually end up with a green solution at the end. And that green solution is going to be a mixture of salt and water. Now we can illustrate this using a chemical equation. Now I've started to sort of write part of it here. Okay, so what we have is this is known as a general equation. Now the reason it's a general equation is because it's sort of just like, here's the overall story of what happened. When we talk about the chemical equation, we'll put some chemicals in, and don't worry, I'll give you an example of that. So the general equation for this neutralization reaction is that an acid plus a base goes to salt and water. Okay, so that is our general reaction. So let's have a little look at a more detailed example. Right, so what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to jot down the general equation. Okay, so acid plus, what is it? Base, good, goes to salt and one other product, water. Okay. So we've got this reaction, this general reaction. Acid plus base goes to salt and water. So let's pick an acid. Okay, so I'm going to pick the acid, hydrochloric acid. And I'm going to pick a base. And the base that I'm going to pick is going to be, let's go for sodium hydroxide. So two very common chemicals that we use throughout chemistry. Okay, so hydrochloric acid and sodium hydroxide. Now what we're going to end up with is we're going to end up with a salt. Okay, now the name of this salt, and I'm going to do another video on naming salt, okay, but this is going to be called sodium chloride. And the other product we're going to get is water. Okay, but as I said, this is going to go from, if I started with a beaker, okay, and I'm going to draw my little beaker out, so let's say I started with a beaker that had some hydrochloric acid in it, use red, because what I've done is I've got a mixture of hydrochloric acid and universal indicator. Okay, so I've got some UI in here as well, universal indicator. And what's going to happen is I'm going to add some of my base that I've also put some UI in. Okay, here we go, here's my great drawing going on. I'm going to add my base to my acid. Okay, what's going to happen is at some point the solution, because of the universal indicator, it'll turn green. Okay, and at this point neutralization has occurred, okay, because I've added the base to the acid. They are opposites of one another, so they will react with each other, okay, and they will go through a chemical reaction. Okay, and they will form a neutral product, okay, which is our salt water. Okay, so hopefully that helps a little bit. Now, what I want you to be thinking about is using this information, so using this understanding of acid plus base go to salt and water. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to look at an example of this in real life in the next video, talking about indigestion. So tune in for that video and have a look at that and see if you can apply this understanding to that problem. Okay, so thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.